My wife and her brothers thought it was hilarious to prank me. They left me stranded 300 miles from home, laughing as they sped off, yelling, "Good luck." I never went back. 5 years later, she found me, and her smile died the second she saw who was standing behind me. It all started like any other road trip with Ashley and her brothers, Mike and Danny. The kind of trip where you don't expect anything out of the ordinary. We were driving through the Arizona desert, heading nowhere in particular, enjoying the open road and the occasional chatter. Ashley was in the passenger seat, texting as usual, while her brothers joked and laughed in the back, throwing playful jabs at me. It was the same routine, a comfortable routine, or so I thought. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt as we pulled into a gas station. A small, rundown place on Highway 78, nothing more than a convenience store and a couple of pumps. I was told to fill the truck, while Ashley and her brothers went inside to grab drinks and use the bathroom. The heat was oppressive. The kind of heat that presses against you like a heavy blanket. I could feel it even in the shade. I stepped out of the truck, grabbed the nozzle, and began the routine of filling the tank. Ashley kissed me on the cheek before she left the truck, her sticky cherry lip gloss brushing against my skin. "You're the best," she said as always. It was an offhand comment, but one I'd gotten used to hearing. I thought nothing of it. But when she kissed me, there was something else behind her smile, something I couldn't place. I watched her walk toward the entrance of the store, followed by Mike and Danny, their laughter echoing in the distance. Then, they were gone, and I was alone. I could hear the engine of the truck roar to life as they backed out of the lot. I turned around, thinking they were coming back. But no. Instead they sped off, the sound of their laughter still floating in the air, followed by a shout that didn't register at first. "Good luck," Mike yelled, barely audible over the engine noise. For a moment, I stood there frozen. I watched them drive away, dust kicking up in the wake of the truck's tires. A pang of disbelief hit me, and for a split second, I thought it was some kind of joke. But the truck was already shrinking into the horizon, the sun setting behind it like the final act in some cruel performance. I was alone. I looked down at the bag of Doritos in my hand, the one I'd grabbed with the last of my cash. It seemed laughable now. My phone, my wallet, my keys, they were all locked in the truck. My dignity, too. All of it, left behind. The heat was unbearable. Sweat trickled down my face, mixing with the dirt and grime from the day. I turned back toward the gas station. The clerk, an older man with sunspots on his arms, was watching me through the window, his eyes sharp but indifferent. He didn't say anything. Just watched, like everyone else who was about to become an audience to my misery. I walked inside, feeling the cold air. Conditioning hit me like a shock to the system. The man didn't ask if I needed help, he just nodded toward the phone on the counter. "They ditch you?" he asked, his voice calm, almost knowing. "Looks like it," I said, my throat dry. I couldn't bring myself to ask for anything more. "Not yet." I picked up the phone, dialing Ashley's number from memory. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried Mike's number. Then Danny's voicemail. The clerk watched as I dialed, his face unreadable. "Can I get you something?" he asked. "Water maybe." "I don't have any money," I said, shaking my head. He grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler, and slid it across the counter. "Anyone who gets ditched in this heat deserves at least that much." I didn't hesitate. I cracked open the bottle and downed it in seconds. The cold water settled in my stomach, a small comfort in the overwhelming heat. I glanced out the window, the truck still sitting there, my phone buzzing in the cup holder. The damn thing probably had some text from Ashley. Some "look at me, I'm sorry" message. I didn't know. And I didn't care. I stared at the empty road outside, the heat waves rising off the blacktop, distorting everything like a bad dream. That's when I realized. This was it. This wasn't just another prank. This wasn't a laugh I'd hear and forgive. This was different. This time, I wasn't going back. It wasn't just that they left me in the desert. It was everything they'd done to me up until then. The constant pranks, the public humiliation, the betrayal disguised as jokes. But standing there in that gas station, I knew with clarity what I hadn't known before. I had to leave. This would never stop unless I made it stop, and I was done being the punchline. I stood there, staring at the empty gas station lot, my thoughts swirling. The desert heat pressed in on me, a constant reminder that I was alone. But not just physically, it was the emotional isolation that hit hardest. I felt like a fool. A part of me had known something like this was coming, but I never imagined it would be so public. So humiliating. The memories came flooding back in flashes, each one more vivid than the last. The first time Ashley had pulled a prank on me, it seemed harmless. We were still newly dating, and her sense of humor was something I was still learning to navigate. She'd staged a surprise proposal at my office, wearing a ridiculous clown costume. She wanted me to be surprised. To act like I didn't know what was happening. At first I'd played along, mostly because I didn't want to disappoint her. I smiled for the cameras, like I was supposed to. She posted it online, of course. It got thousands of views, and she was thrilled. But the looks I got from my coworkers, the awkward glances, that was something I couldn't shake. It didn't feel fun or romantic. It felt like I had been put on display. A few months later, another prank. This time, it was the shampoo. I remember the first time I noticed something was off. My scalp started to itch, but I didn't think much of it. I thought I'd just been under stress, or maybe the heat was getting to me. But then patches of hair began falling out. I remember standing in front of the mirror, running my fingers through what was left. Realizing that I was losing more than I could afford. I had to shave my head completely. When I showed up at work, everyone stared. Ashley posted before and after pictures, tagging me with laughing emojis. It got hundreds of thousands of views. She was proud of it. Proud of making me the punchline again. I should have left her then. But I didn't. I told myself it was just a prank, that she didn't mean any harm, that it was part of who she was. But the pranks kept coming. Every time I thought we'd hit the worst of it, something worse happened. There was the fake car accident. The time when I was in the middle of an important meeting with a client, and got a frantic phone call from Danny. He was screaming that Ashley had been in an accident. I left the meeting immediately, racing across town in a panic, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the hospital, there she was, sitting in the waiting room, munching on vending machine chips. "Gotcha," she said, laughing as Mike filmed the whole thing. "Look at your face." It was a joke to them, but for me it was terror, confusion, and rage all at once. Each time I told myself it was the last one. Each time, Ashley would apologize, say how sorry she was. She'd cry real tears, or at least they seemed real, and tell me it had gone too far. She'd say she loved me, that it was just for fun, that I shouldn't be so sensitive. I always believed her. I always forgave her. But standing there in that gas station, with the heat rising off the pavement, I realized something that I hadn't fully admitted to myself before. It wasn't just a series of harmless jokes. It was cruelty. It was emotional abuse. Every time she hurt me, I told myself it was just a prank, that I should laugh it off. But I couldn't anymore. I thought about the time they locked me in the garage overnight. I'd woken up on the cold concrete, shivering, with nothing but the sound of their laughter echoing through the house. They thought it was hilarious. I didn't. I had to sleep there all night, next to my workbench, wondering how they could have done that to me. The next day, they filmed my reaction when they let me out, posting it online like it was some kind of triumph. I laughed along, because that's what I was supposed to do, right? But this was different. This was the breaking point. As I stood there in the gas station, feeling the weight of everything, I knew something had to change. It wasn't about the pranks anymore. It was about me, my dignity, my sense of self-worth. They'd crossed a line, and I wasn't going to be the punchline anymore. The reality settled in slowly, like the heat that was beginning to suffocate me. I had been in this place before, emotionally, not physically. The humiliation, the embarrassment, the feeling of being small, invisible, like my needs didn't matter. I had put up with it for so long, told myself it was just part of the deal. But it wasn't. It wasn't normal, and I wasn't going to pretend it was anymore. I knew I had to leave. But it wasn't just about getting away from Ashley and her brothers. It was about getting away from the version of myself I'd become. The one who let this happen. The one who let her manipulate me. Let her use me for her content, for her social media following. I didn't want to be that person anymore. I took a deep breath, and walked back out of the gas station, feeling the weight of my decision settle in. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew it would be different. I wouldn't go back. I wouldn't forgive her this time. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. Not with them. Not with her. I was done being the joke. I stepped back out into the blistering heat, the sun beating down like a hammer on an anvil. The air felt thick, like it was holding its breath. The asphalt shimmered, distorting the world around me. I glanced back at the gas station, then out across the empty highway. There was nothing for miles in any direction, just endless desert stretching to the horizon. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. The decision to leave everything behind was made, but the next step wasn't so clear. My phone buzzed again, the screen lighting up through the window of the truck, but I didn't bother checking it. It could have been Ashley, or maybe one of her brothers. Either way, I wasn't going to answer. Not now. I started walking, not toward anything in particular, just away from the truck. Away from the life I'd been living. My feet burned against the pavement, the heat rising off it in waves, but I didn't stop. The wind picked up, kicking dust into my eyes, but I didn't stop. I just walked, one foot in front of the other, moving farther away from the life I thought I was living, the life they had forced me into. As I walked, I found myself thinking of the good times, the early days with Ashley, how she'd make me laugh, how we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. How she'd always had this sparkle in her eye, like she was always in on some secret joke. I'd thought it was just us, that our bond was different from everyone else's. But I was wrong. It was never about me. It was always about her image, about what she could get out of me. I was just the backdrop. The fool. The joke. I didn't know how long I'd been walking when I heard the sound of a truck approaching. The engine hummed in the distance, getting louder as it came closer. I looked up just in time to see a big rig rumble past, kicking up a cloud of dust that stung my face, but the truck didn't keep going. It slowed down and then stopped. The sound of the engine cut out, and the truck door opened. I stopped walking, surprised, unsure of what to do. A man stepped out, big, broad-shouldered, his worn jeans and boots caked in dust. He was probably in his late 50s, but the strength in his posture made him look younger. His face was weathered, skin tanned from years on the road, with a deep scar running down the left side of his cheek. His eyes were sharp, but there was a kindness in them that immediately put me at ease. "You all right, son?" he asked, his voice deep, carrying easily over the silence. I nodded, taking in the sight of him. "Been better," I said, trying to sound casual, but the exhaustion in my voice betrayed me. The man studied me for a moment, looking me up and down, probably noticing the sweat on my forehead, the way I was standing like I was ready to collapse any second. He didn't push me for details though, just nodded like he understood. "Where you headed?" "Anywhere but here," I said without thinking. He chuckled, and I couldn't help but feel a small bit of relief. "You got a name?" "Ross," I said. "You?" "Earl Patterson." He wiped his brow with a bandana, his expression softening. "I'm headed to Albuquerque, then north to Denver. Got room in the cab if you need a ride." I hesitated, unsure. It was strange, the idea of getting into a truck with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. But something about the guy's calm, no-nonsense presence made me feel safe, and frankly I didn't have many other options. "Thanks," I said finally. I could use the ride. Earl didn't ask questions, didn't pry. He just handed me a bottle of water and motioned for me to hop in the passenger seat. I grabbed my bag, the only thing I had left with me, and climbed up into the cab. The air was cooler in there, the smell of diesel and leather filling my nostrils. But it felt better than standing out in the heat. We started driving, the sound of the tires on the road a steady hum beneath us. Earl didn't talk much at first. He just kept his eyes on the road, steering with a firm grip. I was fine with the silence. I wasn't ready to talk about why I was out here, why I was walking away from everything. So, I kept my thoughts to myself. The desert stretched out on either side of us, the landscape an endless sea of sand and scrub. I watched the scenery pass, the mountains in the distance, the occasional cactus standing tall against the harsh environment. It was almost beautiful, in a way. But the beauty of it didn't match the emptiness I felt inside. After a while, Earl glanced over at me. "You running from something?" he asked casually, his eyes still mostly on the road. I didn't answer right away. The question wasn't one I wanted to answer, not now, not yet. But something about the way he asked it, so matter of fact, made me feel like I could say something. "Running towards something maybe," I finally said, my voice low. Earl gave a slight nod. "That's honest," he said. "I respect honest." The truck rolled on for another hour in silence. The sun was starting to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the road. The heat from the day was starting to give way to cooler air, and I could feel my mind start to clear, the fog of exhaustion lifting just a little. The phone buzzed again in my pocket. This time, I didn't even look at it. Whatever it was, I didn't need to see it. I had bigger things to worry about now. Like figuring out how to get my life back on track. "You got family?" Earl asked, breaking the silence. "My parents are in Minnesota," I said, thinking about them for a second. "We're not close. Haven't talked to them in a couple of years." Earl didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He just nodded like he understood. We kept driving through the night, heading towards Albuquerque, then north to Denver. I didn't know where I was going after that. All I knew was that I wasn't going back to her. The desert was fading in the rearview mirror, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. We stopped for the night at a truck stop just outside Albuquerque. Earl pulled the rig into a spot, killing the engine with a deep rumble. I climbed out of the cab, stretching my stiff legs, as the cool evening air wrapped around me. The desert's heat still lingered, but it was bearable now, the kind of dry heat that makes you appreciate a slight breeze. The truck stop was quiet, a few rigs parked along the lot, their engines humming softly, the occasional trucker walking inside for food or coffee. Earl waved toward the diner. "You hungry?" I nodded. My stomach had been gnawing at me for hours, and I realized I hadn't eaten much since I left the gas station. I had grabbed a bag of Doritos before the truck left, but that was it. The thought of real food made my mouth water. I followed Earl inside, the bell above the door ringing as we entered. The diner smelled like grease and coffee, but there was something comforting about it. It was a far cry from the fancy places Ashley would drag me to, with their overpriced meals and pristine decor. This was simple, no frills, just food. Earl walked up to the counter and ordered first, his voice familiar and steady as he asked for a chicken fried steak with mashed potatoes. I followed suit, choosing the same, figuring if he was going for it, so would I. We sat at a booth near the window, the low hum of conversation around us blending with the soft clink of silverware. I picked at the menu, trying to keep my mind occupied, but my thoughts kept drifting back to everything I'd left behind. The empty feeling in my chest was still there, though it wasn't as heavy as before. The weight of the decision to leave was finally starting to sink in, and the reality was starting to feel a little more possible. "You got family?" Earl asked between bites of his food. I looked up, caught off guard by the question. It was the first time he'd really asked me anything personal. For a moment, I hesitated. The thought of my parents, of how they would react if they knew what had happened, felt distant. "My parents are in Minnesota," I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "We're not close. Haven't talked to them in a couple of years." Earl didn't ask why. He didn't need to. There was no judgment in his eyes, just understanding. He took another bite of his steak, chewing slowly. "Family's a funny thing," he said, looking out the window at the empty parking lot. "Some people stick together, no matter what. Others, well, sometimes it's better when they're far away." I wasn't sure if he was talking about his own family or just commenting on mine, but I nodded. "Yeah, I guess." I had always felt the distance between me and my family, even before Ashley and her brothers had started their pranks. It wasn't that we were estranged, but there was always a wall there. My parents were old-fashioned, strict in ways that felt suffocating, and I had never quite measured up to their expectations. Even when I did everything right, it never felt like enough. The visits were short, the conversations even shorter. I didn't know if it was the distance or the years of emotional strain, but somewhere along the way, I had stopped trying. Ashley had always been the glue, the one who kept me connected. But now, I realized, it had all been a lie, a performance. "You ever think about going back?" Earl asked, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced up at him, surprised. "To my family, no. I don't think they'd understand. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But it's not them you need to answer to, is it?" He gave me a sideways glance. "And if you don't deal with whatever's been eating at you, it'll follow you. No matter where you go." His words hit harder than I expected. I had been running physically from Ashley, emotionally from my family, from myself. I hadn't even realized it until now. Earl wasn't just talking about going back to Minnesota. He was talking about facing everything I had been avoiding, everything I had buried. The guilt. The shame. The anger. "I'm not sure I'm ready to face it all," I said quietly, almost to myself. "I don't know how." Earl leaned back in his seat, his eyes steady on me. "That's all right. You don't have to do it all at once. But you can't just keep running." The waitress brought our food, and we both dug in. The chicken fried steak was the best I'd had in a long time, crispy on the outside, tender on the inside, the mashed potatoes creamy and smooth. It was a small comfort, but it was enough for now. We ate in silence, the steady rhythm of our forks against the plates, filling the air between us. After a while, Earl stood up, leaving some bills on the table. "You can stay here for the night if you want," he said. "I'm leaving early in the morning, heading for Denver. But I can drop you wherever you need to go. I'm not in any rush." I didn't answer right away. The idea of staying in one place, even for just a night, felt strange after everything. But at the same time, there was something appealing about the idea of a clean break. No more driving. No more running. I could just stop and breathe. "Thanks, but I think I'll keep moving," I said, standing up and pushing my chair back. "I've got to figure things out, you know. I can't just stay in one place forever." Earl nodded, giving me a small smile. "I hear you, son. But don't forget to take care of yourself along the way." We left the diner, and Earl's truck roared to life as we hit the road again. The night had fallen, the stars shining bright above us in the clear desert sky. The road stretched out ahead, the headlights cutting through the darkness. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I might actually have a chance to figure things out. The morning after we left Albuquerque, Earl and I were already miles down the road, the truck rumbling steadily beneath us. The landscape had shifted from the wide, empty expanse of the desert to more varied terrain, rolling hills dotted with sparse patches of grass and scattered shrubs. The sun was still low, casting a soft orange glow over everything, but I could feel the weight of the day ahead settling on my shoulders. Earl was silent for most of the ride, but I didn't mind. There was something comforting about his quiet presence. It was like he understood that I wasn't ready to talk yet, that I needed time to process. I let my thoughts drift, focusing on the road ahead. I wasn't sure what I was running toward, but I knew I couldn't go back, not ever. By the time we reached Denver, I was exhausted, mentally and physically. Earl dropped me off at a small motel near the outskirts of town, the neon sign flickering faintly in the early morning light. He didn't ask for anything in return for the ride, no money, no favors. He just wished me luck, and I thanked him, knowing that he had given me more than just a lift. He had given me space. Space to breathe. Space to start over. I checked into the motel with the little cash I had left, paying for a few nights in advance. The room smelled like stale air and bleach, but it was clean, and it was mine. For now, anyway. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a job lined up. But I had the freedom to figure it out, and that was something I hadn't had in a long time. The next few days were a blur of exhaustion and aimlessness. I spent most of my time in the room, staring at the cracked walls or flipping through job listings on my phone, but none of it felt real. I wasn't sure where to start. There was a part of me that still felt tethered to everything I had left behind. The apartment, the memories, the life I had tried to build with Ashley. But another part of me, the part that had been buried under years of manipulation, was starting to wake up. I wasn't ready to face it all, but I knew I had to. It was time to start facing the truth. One evening, I decided to take a walk. The weather had turned cooler, and the crisp air felt like a relief after days of staying cooped up. I wandered through the streets, letting my mind clear. I didn't have a destination, but I knew I couldn't keep running away from everything. I had to deal with it eventually. As I walked, I noticed a small office on the corner, a faded sign that read, Colorado Legal Services. It was a small, no-nonsense place. The kind of office you would expect to find in a city that was still waking up to the fact that it was becoming a hub for all kinds of people. I stood outside the door for a moment, wondering if I was ready to take the next step. I pushed the door open and walked inside. The smell of paper and coffee greeted me, and the sound of a phone ringing filled the air. A receptionist looked up from her desk and smiled. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I need to talk to someone about a divorce," I said, my voice steady despite the nervousness bubbling inside me. She nodded and handed me a clipboard with some forms. "We can get you in with one of our attorneys. Just fill these out, and we'll get started." I sat down in the waiting area, filling out the forms as best as I could. The weight of what I was doing began to sink in. I was taking the first real step toward breaking free from the past. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew that I couldn't go back to the way things were. After a while, a woman came out from the back. She was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and an air of professionalism that immediately put me at ease. "Mr. Webb?" she asked, her voice calm but direct. "Yeah," I said, standing up. "That's me, Maria Vasquez," she introduced herself. "Let's talk." She led me into a small office in the back, where we sat down across from each other at a cluttered desk. The walls were lined with legal books, and a small window looked out onto the street. Maria didn't waste time. She immediately asked me to tell her what was going on. I hesitated at first. I didn't know where to begin. The whole situation felt surreal, like something that was happening to someone else. But as I spoke, telling her about the pranks, the emotional manipulation, the way Ashley had turned my life into a joke, something inside me started to shift. I wasn't just telling her a story. I was telling the truth, the real truth. When I finished, Maria leaned back in her chair, her eyes focused on me. "What you've described here sounds like emotional and psychological abuse," she said, her tone even but firm. "This isn't just a bad relationship. This is something more. If you want to file for divorce, we can do that. But there are also other legal avenues we can explore, especially with the things you've mentioned. The pranks, the abandonment, you may have grounds for more than just a divorce." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had been thinking of this as just a divorce, a way to get out of my marriage. But now, I saw that it could be something bigger. Something that held Ashley accountable for everything she had done. I sat there for a moment, processing what she had said. Maria's words felt like a lifeline, but they also felt like a weight. I wasn't sure I was ready for what this would mean. But I knew I couldn't stay in the same place I had been. I had to move forward. "You don't have to make any decisions today," Maria said, breaking through my thoughts. "But if you're ready, we can start the process." I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over something. I nodded. "I'm ready." It wasn't the answer I had expected to give, but it was the answer I needed to give. The first step had been taken. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I might just be able to start rebuilding. 5 years had passed since I left it all behind, but that didn't mean I had truly escaped. I kept my distance from the past, tried to start over, but a part of me always knew Ashley would find me. The truth was, I hadn't been completely free. Not until now. It started with a phone call. The number was unfamiliar, but I recognized the area code. California. I didn't answer at first, thinking it was just another spam call. But then it buzzed again, and something about it made me hesitate. I picked it up on the third ring. Hello. My voice felt foreign in my own ears. Mr. Webb. A woman's voice, professional and calm, on the other end. This is Jennifer Torres from Peninsula Private Investigations. I've been hired to locate you on behalf of Ashley Morrison Webb. Would you be willing to speak with her? I froze. For a moment, I couldn't even process what she had said. It wasn't a shock deep down, I'd known it would happen eventually, but hearing her name, Ashley's name, brought everything rushing back. The pranks, the humiliation, the lies. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves. I don't have anything to say to her, I said, trying to keep my voice as steady as possible. I'm done with that part of my life. Jennifer didn't push. She simply said, I understand. If you change your mind, I'll be here. But I thought you should know she's looking for you. She's been searching for quite some time. I hung up without another word, the silence ringing in my ears. I didn't know if I felt relief or dread, but one thing was certain: I wasn't done. Not yet. Later that day, as I sat at my desk at the small tech startup I had been working at for the past year, the reality set in. Ashley had found me. That was just the beginning. I wasn't going to sit back and let her rewrite history. I had spent years rebuilding my life, and I wasn't about to let her destroy it again. I turned to Sarah. She was the one constant in my life now, the one person who had never tried to turn me into a joke. We were sitting at our usual coffee shop, the quiet hum of conversations around us. It felt like the right place to talk. She found me, I said, looking down at the table. I could feel her eyes on me as I spoke, her calm presence a comforting anchor in the chaos of my thoughts. Ooh? She asked, though I knew she already knew the answer. Ashley, she hired a private investigator. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable, but I could feel the tension in her. So, what do you want to do? I didn't have to think about it. I want a file. I want everything legal and locked down before she shows up. Sarah didn't hesitate. She nodded, her face set in determination. I'll call the lawyer's office tomorrow. We'll get started on it today. Just like that, it was settled. It wasn't a question anymore. It was the next step. No more running. No more pretending it didn't matter. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and endless discussions with Sarah. She was meticulous, going over every detail with me, every piece of evidence we had. It wasn't just about the divorce anymore. It was about making sure Ashley and her family paid for what they had done. I had saved everything: screenshots of their social media posts, the prank videos, the text messages. The pranks weren't just pranks. They were a calculated campaign to destroy my sense of self, to turn my suffering into content for their followers. And they had profited from it. The night before we were set to file, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, the weight of everything we were about to do settling over me like a blanket. I had spent so much time trying to forget it, trying to heal, but now I had to face it all again. I thought about the moment I had left, standing in the desert, feeling the heat on my skin and the emptiness in my chest. But that wasn't who I was anymore. I had changed. I wasn't that man who let Ashley control the narrative. I wasn't the victim anymore. The next morning, we filed. Sarah was with me every step of the way, guiding me through the process. We filed for divorce, citing abandonment and emotional cruelty. We also filed a civil suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, theft of my vehicle, criminal abandonment, false imprisonment, and unlawful monetization of my humiliation. Everything was in that filing. The proof, the timeline of abuse, the impact it had on my life. And just like that, it was official. I had started the process of reclaiming my life. The phone rang again that afternoon. It was Jennifer Torres again, her voice as calm as ever. Mr. Webb, I just wanted to let you know that we've located your wife. She's aware of the proceedings and is attempting to contact you. Would you like me to pass along a message? No. I said, my voice steady. I don't want to speak to her. Just let her know I'm done. I hung up, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt a strange sense of peace in that moment. The process had started. Ashley had made her move, but I had already moved on. Later that week, Sarah and I were meeting with her colleagues, going over more legal details, when the inevitable happened. The elevator doors opened in the lobby of the building, and there she was. Ashley. She didn't see me right away. I watched her before she saw me. Her hair was shorter than it used to be. Her clothes more expensive but ill-fitting. As though she was trying too hard to appear different. She froze when she saw me, her mouth falling open in disbelief. Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering on the marble floor. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just watched her, as her shock turned to panic. She rushed toward me, tears already welling up in her eyes. Oh my God, Marcus, I've been looking everywhere for you. I'm so sorry, I was stupid. I didn't understand what I was doing. I couldn't even bring myself to speak at first. My heart didn't ache. It didn't break, it just was. And it wasn't enough anymore. I took a step back, my voice cold and calm. "Why are you here?" She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "Please," she begged. "Please, Marcus, I've changed. Mike and Danny feel terrible. We all do." I shook my head, taking another step back. "You deleted the videos 2 months ago," I said. "After they had been up for 5 years. After you made money off of me. After you turned me into your content." Her face went red, the color draining from her eyes. She stepped back slightly, trying to gather herself. But it was too late. I had already made my decision. And nothing she said could change that. Ashley stood there, frozen, as I let her words fall away. Nothing but empty echoes in the sterile lobby. She had this frantic, desperate look in her eyes, but there was something else there too, something calculating. I knew her better than that. She wasn't here because she was sorry. She was here because she had to be. She had to fix things, to make sure that everything she'd done didn't come back to haunt her. Her hands trembled as she reached for me again. This time more cautiously, like she was testing the waters. I stepped back, my chest tight, and felt the wall between us grow higher. She was still trying to get inside my space, trying to crawl back into my life, and I wasn't gonna let her. "Marcus, please, I came here to apologize," she said, her voice breaking, but I didn't believe her anymore. I'd heard that tone before, seen the tears, the fake remorse, and I was done with it. "You don't know what this has done to me," she continued, her voice rising. "The humiliation. The stress. The way people have talked about us. I've had to carry that for years." I shook my head, the rage simmering beneath the surface. "Humiliation," I repeated, my voice low but steady. "You don't get to call it humiliation, Ashley. You turned my life into a joke. You made money off my suffering. You posted videos of me in the desert, abandoned in 107-degree heat, with nothing but a bag of chips. You laughed, and so did your brothers." Her eyes narrowed, and the hurt expression faltered. She tried to recover, but the cracks were already showing. "It was just for fun. You know that," she said, almost pleading. "It wasn't meant to hurt you. Just for fun." I echoed, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "You thought it was fun to humiliate me, to make me a punchline for your followers." My voice grew colder, the truth coming out in sharp, cutting words. "You thought it was funny when I had to shave my head because of that shampoo prank. You thought it was funny when you faked that car accident. And I drove like a maniac to get to the hospital, only to find out it was a joke. You thought it was funny when you locked me in the garage overnight, filmed my reaction, and posted it online. Every time you did something, you said you were sorry, but you never stopped." She recoiled at my words, but I didn't care. I had been silent for so long, carrying the weight of everything she'd done to me. And now I was finally letting it out. I wasn't holding back anymore. I looked at her, really looked at her, and in that moment, I realized something that had been staring me in the face for years. "You never loved me," I said, the words coming out steady, calm, almost too calm. "You loved what I gave you. The stability, the paycheck, the target for your content. But you never loved me." Her face twisted with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She was searching for something, anything, to get back into my good graces. "That's not true," she said, her voice rising in frustration. "You're being dramatic, Marcus. We were happy once, you know that. We can fix this. You just have to give me a chance." I shook my head, my chest tightening with the weight of everything that had happened. "No, I gave you chances. I gave you everything I had. And every time, you destroyed it." The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then, just as the air seemed to grow thicker, the elevator doors dinged. Sarah stepped out, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. She walked toward me, her posture confident, her expression calm but knowing. She didn't look at Ashley, not right away. She just walked over to my side and kissed my cheek. Her presence an anchor in the storm of emotions swirling inside me. I could feel Ashley's gaze on us, sharp and filled with confusion. She opened her mouth to say something, but Sarah beat her to it. "I'm Sarah Chen," she said, her voice steady, professional. "Marcus's fiancée and his attorney." I felt Ashley's world shatter in real time. I saw her mouth open, her eyes widening, and for a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. But I quickly pushed that thought aside. She'd been playing me for years. She didn't deserve my sympathy. Ashley stumbled back, her face going pale as the reality hit her. She was no longer in control of the situation. She had lost. And I was the one who had finally taken charge of my life. Sarah stepped closer, her heels clicking again, and reached into her briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. She placed it on the table between us, pushing it toward Ashley. "This is the divorce petition we filed this morning," Sarah said calmly, her voice never wavering. "Abandonment, emotional cruelty, and systematic abuse. You'll be served within the week." Ashley reached for the folder, her hands shaking as she picked it up. "You can't do this," she whispered, her voice cracking as she looked at the pages inside. This isn't fair. It's not about fairness, Ashley, I said quietly, my voice devoid of emotion. It's about accountability. You don't get to keep doing this to people. Not anymore. Sarah slid her tablet over to Ashley, showing her the screen. It was a video, one of the many. The one where Ashley had left me in the desert. The one that had been viewed almost 750,000 times. The one where I had stood in the heat, alone and abandoned, while Ashley and her brothers laughed. This video is part of the evidence, Sarah said, her voice steady. Along with everything else. Every video. Every post. Every text message. The timeline of abuse. The financial impact on Marcus. You can try to deny it, but the evidence is right there. Ashley's face twisted in a mixture of anger and desperation. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. I was just trying to make something of myself. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I'm done. The elevator doors opened again, and I didn't look back as I walked out with Sarah at my side. The world was different now. I was different now. And Ashley. She would never have the power to hurt me again. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Ashley signed everything, didn't contest a single thing. There was no dramatic fight, no final moment of manipulation, just her signature on a set of papers that freed me from her once and for all. It was almost anticlimactic, the way it ended, but I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for peace. And that's exactly what I got. Sarah and I spent the next year building our life together. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was real. We bought a small house in Carmel, right by the ocean. A 3-bedroom place with a view that made me feel like I was finally breathing in a space that was mine. Ours. No more cameras, no more performances, no more pretending. Just the quiet sound of waves crashing against the shore. And the occasional chirp of birds in the morning. It was everything I had been searching for. And it was enough. We didn't rush things. We took our time, enjoying the life we were creating, getting to know each other even more deeply than before. There were hard moments, of course. There always are. The scars from my marriage, the emotional abuse, they didn't disappear overnight. But they became manageable. I saw Dr. Monroe once a month, still processing things, still untangling the knots in my mind. It was part of the healing, part of the ongoing work I was doing to rebuild myself. Sarah and I got engaged a year after the divorce was finalized. It wasn't a grand gesture, no flashy proposal in front of an audience, just a simple moment between the two of us. We were at home, sitting on the couch after dinner, when I asked her if she would marry me. She said yes, of course. There was no doubt in her eyes, no hesitation. It was the kind of moment I had always imagined, but this time it wasn't for anyone else. It was just for us. We planned a small wedding on the beach, just close family and a few friends. It wasn't a big affair, but it was perfect. Sarah's parents, my parents, people who really knew us and supported us. I looked out at the ocean as we exchanged vows, and I thought about how far I had come from the desert, from the pranks, from the pain. I thought about the man I was when I walked away from Ashley, and how I had transformed since then. I wasn't the same person, and I was proud of that. 3 years after I disappeared, after everything had unraveled and been put back together again, I received another call. It was from Jennifer Torres again, the private investigator. She was polite but firm, as always. Mr. Webb, I'm calling to inform you that we've been contacted by your ex-wife's attorney. They want to discuss a settlement. She's offering to waive all claims, including the civil suit, in exchange for you dropping the divorce case and any future legal action. I didn't answer right away. I sat in silence, thinking. They had tried to erase the evidence, tried to cover up what they had done. But they couldn't. It was too late. I turned to Sarah, who was sitting beside me. She didn't need to ask. She already knew what I was thinking. Do you want to respond? She asked, her voice steady. I shook my head. No, I'm not going to entertain it. Not after everything. Not after what they put me through. Sarah smiled softly, squeezing my hand. You've come a long way, Marcus. They don't get to dictate your life anymore. That was the final moment of closure I needed. I didn't respond to Ashley's offer. I didn't need to. She was no longer a part of my world, and I was okay with that. I had taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let her come back and disrupt it again. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Ashley's attorney. She was waiving all claims and offering to remove all videos and references. It was a last-ditch attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of her actions. But it didn't matter to me anymore. I had already moved on. I was no longer the man she had left in the desert. I was no longer the man who let her use him. The civil suit was dropped, and the criminal investigation in Arizona went nowhere. The lack of evidence, the passage of time, those were things Ashley had hoped for. But it didn't matter. The damage had been done. Mike's YouTube channel never recovered. It shrank to a fraction of its former size, With every new video riddled with comments about the desert prank, the one that had tarnished everything. Ashley deleted all her social media, disappeared from the internet entirely. Danny moved to Oregon, took a job at a ski resort, and stopped posting anything online. They had tried to erase the past, but the internet doesn't forget. And me, I kept building. Sarah and I got married a year after the divorce was finalized. A small, beautiful ceremony at the beach, just the way we wanted. We didn't need anything extravagant. Just each other, surrounded by the people who truly cared about us. We bought a house in Carmel, a place where we could grow together. I knew that the future I was building wasn't just mine, it was ours. I still see Dr. Monroe once a month, still working through the scars, but I'm happy. Truly happy. The kind of happiness that doesn't need to be validated, or performed for an audience. The kind that comes from knowing you've reclaimed your life, your worth, and your peace. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I think back to that gas station in the desert. To the moment I decided to leave it all behind. To the man I was then, and the man I've become. It was the best decision I ever made. Because they didn't leave me in the desert. I left them in the dust, and I never looked back.